Have you ever wondered what happens when the biggest boy band in the world suddenly finds their massive legacy being manipulated right behind their backs? Welcome back. Today, we are diving deep into a mega scandal that shook the army to its core. BTS furious, fans shocked after their fame was allegedly misused. Imagine pouring your blood, sweat, and tears into building a global empire from the ground up, only to realize that incredibly greedy individuals might be secretly exploiting your hard-earned name. How would you feel if trusted figures completely twisted your monumental fame for their own selfish profit without your consent? Are these explosive allegations just wild media rumors, or is there a dark, undeniable truth hiding right beneath the shiny surface of the K-pop industry? Sit tight, brace your emotions, and get ready for a jaw-dropping countdown. Number 7. RM, the mastermind exploited, trust broken, millions stolen. When we talk about the monumental, gravity-defying rise of BTS, it is absolutely impossible to even begin the conversation without shining a massive, glaring spotlight on Kim Namjoon, globally known as RM, the brilliant mastermind and the unbreakable pillar who literally carried the crushing weight of the group's early survival on his sturdy shoulders. But what happens when that meticulously crafted reputation of absolute integrity is hijacked by soulless opportunists who see his name not as a symbol of hope, but as a shiny golden ticket to unimaginable illicit wealth? Just pause for a second and try to fathom the sheer magnitude of RM's influence, a man whose intellect and profound empathy have guided 7 young boys from a cramped, dusty, leak-prone dorm room in the harsh winters of Seoul, all the way to the glittering, historic podium of the United Nations General Assembly, speaking directly to the youth of the world about self-love, resilience, and the immense courage required to speak one's truth, creating an aura of credibility that is virtually unmatched in the chaotic, often superficial realm of the modern entertainment industry. And yet, it is precisely this immaculate credibility that made him the ultimate unsuspecting target for a deeply malicious exploitation that left millions of fans absolutely breathless with rage. Imagine the blood-boiling scenario where shady corporate entities and cunning financial scammers secretly plaster RM's name or heavily imply his direct involvement across sketchy investment portfolios, bogus cryptocurrency schemes, or unauthorized high-priced art exhibitions, deliberately preying on the fierce, unquestioning loyalty of the global army, who would naturally want to fiercely support anything and everything their beloved leader even remotely endorses, effectively turning Namjoon's hard-earned legacy into a cheap, disgusting bait-and-switch operation that mercilessly drains the bank accounts of innocent, hard-working people who genuinely thought they were investing in his beautiful vision. How absolutely sickening is it to realize that while RM was busy staying up until dawn writing deeply introspective lyrics about the heartbreaking struggles of youth, battling his own relentless inner demons, and pouring his raw soul into creating a safe, comforting space for millions of lost souls around the planet, these greedy parasites in expensive tailored suits were sitting in pristine, high-rise corporate offices, coldly and calculatedly figuring out exactly how much cash they could violently squeeze out of his unblemished reputation before the authorities or his agency finally caught on to their nefarious schemes. The emotional whiplash here is incredibly profound. For a leader who has always aggressively prioritized transparency with his fans, who has bravely bared his deepest, darkest insecurities on solo tracks like Always and Reflection, the mere thought of his trusted name being weaponized to deceive the very people he swore to protect must be nothing short of a suffocating psychological nightmare, a deeply personal violation that cuts far deeper than any multi-million-dollar financial loss ever could. You truly have to understand the grueling, tear-soaked backstory here to even begin to grasp the severity of this betrayal. Namjoon sacrificed his own individual gritty hip-hop dreams in the underground scene of Dainonhip, enduring brutal public mockery from former peers who called him a sellout and facing relentless pressure from harsh idol critics alike, just to slowly build the bulletproof brand of BTS brick by agonizing brick, spending countless sleepless nights in his dimly lit studio, tweaking drum beats and agonizing over every single syllable until his eyes literally bled, all to ensure that the name BTS would forever remain synonymous with authenticity, passion, and raw, unfiltered truth. So, when faceless conglomerates and opportunistic scammers decide to shamelessly bypass all ethical boundaries using sneaky loopholes in international intellectual property laws or straight-up deceptive predatory marketing tactics to falsely associate their subpar money-grabbing ventures with his highly respected intellectual persona, perhaps by faking his endorsement of a newly built art gallery or claiming he invested in a volatile tech startup, it is not just a mere dry copyright infringement, it is a direct, violent assault on his very identity and everything he has bravely stood for over the past grueling decade in the spotlight. It makes you sit back in your chair and violently question the dark, festering underbelly of monumental fame itself. At what terrifying point does a living, breathing human being stop being a person with feelings and magically morph into a completely commodified public asset that any ruthless shark can just exploit for a quick, dirty buck? When the explosive news broke that these unauthorized entities were allegedly using the BTS brand power without Big Hit Music's consent, heavily leaning on RM's trustworthy vibe to lure in victims, the global army did not just trend a few angry hashtags on social media. They mobilized like a highly trained, terrifyingly efficient digital military force, obsessively digging through obscure corporate records, exposing the fraudulent financial links, and demanding fierce, immediate legal retribution, proving once again that you absolutely do not mess with the leader of the biggest musical phenomenon in human history without facing an absolute earth-shattering consequences avalanche. But despite this fierce, heartwarming protection from the fans, the lingering, haunting question remains echoing loudly in the minds of everyone who truly cares about the sensitive man behind the massive moniker. How does Kim Namjoon peacefully sleep at night knowing that out there in the sprawling, completely unregulated wilderness of the internet and corporate greed, there are constantly faceless people plotting in the shadows to carve out a piece of his soul for their own rapidly expanding financial portfolios? Doesn't it just make your stomach churn uncontrollably to think that the music industry's brightest, most articulate minds are constantly forced to nervously look over their shoulders, paranoid that their next casual recommendation, whether it be a profound philosophical book they read on a flight or a gorgeous abstract painting they admired at a quiet museum during their precious Namjooning time, instantly might be hijacked by opportunistic vultures desperately trying to manufacture a fake, highly profitable endorsement out of thin air? The harsh reality of this situation is as utterly terrifying as it is wildly infuriating, serving as a brutal, ice-cold splash of water that in the hyper-capitalist, ravenous machine of global pop culture, absolutely no amount of fame, unprecedented power, or universally recognized goodness can fully shield you from the predatory instincts of those who worship nothing but the almighty dollar, leaving us to intensely wonder if even the great RM, a man fiercely protected by a billion-dollar agency conglomerate and an uncompromising army of tens of millions, can have his sacred name thrown into the disgusting mud of unauthorized exploitation, what hope there is for the rest of the vulnerable artists struggling to maintain their ownership in this ruthless, unforgiving world. This is far more than just a passing celebrity scandal. It is a profound, heart-wrenching tragedy of modern celebrity culture, a dark cautionary tale that forces every single devoted fan to desperately reevaluate the dangerously blurry lines between genuine, loving support and blind, manipulatable consumption,
fiercely challenging us all to look significantly closer at the media we consume daily and the unseen, greedy hands that desperately try to control the narratives, urging us with every fiber of our being to vigorously protect the authentic, life-saving voices that actually matter before they are completely, irreversibly drowned out by the deafening, monstrous roar of corporate greed and shameless, soul-crushing exploitation.
Number 6. Jin, the worldwide handsome, hijacked, privacy shattered, a hero's heart betrayed. When we shift our intense focus to the incredibly resilient and universally adored eldest member of BTS, Kim Seok-jin, famously and affectionately known across the globe as worldwide handsome, the sheer level of audacity displayed by those attempting to exploit his pure, unproblematic image becomes absolutely stomach-churning and deeply terrifying to witness. It is utterly essential to first deeply understand the immense, often invisible emotional weight that Jin has carried since the very beginning of the group's tumultuous journey. He was originally an acting major at the prestigious Jungkook University, a young, starry-eyed man who was violently thrust into the grueling, hyper-competitive, deeply unforgiving world of idol training with absolutely zero background in professional singing or dancing. A man who literally shed blood, sweat, and endless silent tears behind tightly closed doors in the dead of night to meticulously match the terrifyingly high performance skill level of his naturally gifted younger members, constantly hiding his own intense physical pain, crippling exhaustion, and profound, suffocating insecurities behind his trademark infectious windshield wiper laugh and an endlessly bright, goofy persona that was deliberately and carefully designed to keep the entire team's morale afloat during their absolute darkest, most desperate days of near bankruptcy, public humiliation, and relentless industry mockery. So what exactly happens when this beautiful, carefully nurtured reputation of a man who wrote the deeply healing, generation-defining masterpiece Epiphany, bravely teaching tens of millions of desperate, lost souls about the vital, non-negotiable importance of unconditionally loving oneself, is viciously hijacked by ruthless commercial entities, faceless corporations, and morally bankrupt individuals who view his angelic face not as a symbol of hope, but as a walking, breathing, limitless ATM machine. Imagine the pure, blinding, earth-shattering rage of the global army when horrifying, highly detailed reports suddenly surfaced detailing exactly how unauthorized, shady beauty brands, completely unregulated cosmetic surgery clinics, and highly deceptive, aggressive digital marketing campaigns were allegedly manipulating his globally recognized, perfectly symmetrical facial features and illegally weaponizing his iconic worldwide handsome moniker to aggressively peddle their unverified, potentially dangerous products and highly questionable medical services, explicitly preying on naive, vulnerable consumers by falsely implying that Jin himself exclusively endorsed or personally utilized their highly suspicious businesses, effectively turning his natural, God-given confidence and charming humor into a cheap, heavily commercialized weapon of mass deception that completely and utterly violates his strict intellectual property rights, his agency's strict legal boundaries, and his own personal dignity. But the horrific, mind-boggling exploitation does not even remotely stop at mere financial scams, fake celebrity endorsements, and unauthorized, low-quality counterfeit merchandise. It violently bleeds into the absolute most sacred, heavily guarded, and highly vulnerable aspects of his personal life, culminating in a deeply disturbing, unprecedented, and frankly nightmarish incident during his mandatory military enlistment that left the entire world completely speechless with disgust and genuine palpable fear for his physical safety and mental well-being.
How can anyone simply brush off the terrifying, undeniable reality that while Jin was bravely fulfilling his patriotic duty as an active-duty frontline soldier, quietly enduring the grueling, relentless physical demands, the brutal, biting, freezing cold of the harsh Korean winter at the training base, and completely stripping himself of his massive, untouchable superstar status to serve humbly alongside regular, everyday citizens, an unauthorized, highly ranked military nurse from a completely different, unrelated division allegedly abused her official power and actively abandoned her strictly designated medical post, illegally sneaking into his specific high-security division under completely false pretenses just to unlawfully administer a vaccination directly to him, purely driven by a sick, twisted, deeply obsessive desire to get physically close to the mega celebrity and subsequently brag to her peers about this massive, highly illegal security breach, sickeningly treating a man who was selflessly and quietly serving his nation like an exotic caged zoo animal or a highly coveted shiny trophy rather than a living, breathing human being completely entitled to basic fundamental privacy and absolute uncompromising security. The sheer, terrifying, far-reaching implications of this massive military protocol breach are more than enough to send icy, paralyzing shivers down anyone's spine. If a sworn, fully licensed medical professional, someone who is legally and morally bound by the absolute strictest codes of ethical conduct, professional integrity, and patient confidentiality, can so easily and shamelessly bypass strict military security measures just to unlawfully access Kim Sek-jin for her own selfish, twisted, clout-chasing gratification, what other malicious, unseen, deeply sinister forces are constantly lurking in the dark digital shadows of the internet, patiently waiting for the absolute perfect opportunity to brutally exploit, secretly photograph, or illegally sell his incredibly private, highly sensitive information to the highest bidding trashy tabloid or wildly obsessive dangerous stalker? This is the agonizing, deeply suffocating, and incredibly lonely reality of global hyperfame that absolutely no one in the shiny, manufactured pop industry actually wants to talk about, a terrifying, claustrophobic existence where even your most patriotic, honorable, and selfless acts are ruthlessly commodified and exploited for viral clicks, and where your incredibly protective, fiercely loyal family members, like his older brother, whose own private, completely separate restaurant business has constantly been subjected to relentless, unauthorized filming by absolute strangers, devastating fake reviews from malicious, highly coordinated anti-fan groups, and absolute chaotic, stress-inducing harassment by desperate individuals desperately trying to squeeze any tangential, minuscule connection to the BTS superstar for their own twisted clout and massive financial gain. You really have to stop, take a deep breath, and aggressively question the deeply flawed, highly exploitive, and morally bankrupt nature of our modern celebrity-worshipping society when a man who has consistently and flawlessly proven himself to be the ultimate, unbreakable pillar of emotional support for his 6 beloved bandmates, a brave man who bravely confessed his agonizing, tear-soaked struggles with massive, paralyzing burnout and deeply suffocating imposter syndrome in his devastatingly raw, profoundly vulnerable solo track, Abyss, is continuously and shamelessly treated as public, communal property, completely stripped of his fundamental human right to simply exist peacefully, without a terrifying, suffocating array of flashing cameras, cunning financial scammers, and opportunistic blood-sucking leeches trying to violently rip a massive piece of his astronomical influence away for their own selfish, bottomless greed.
Number 5. Suga, the genius producer manipulated, shadows exploited, and artist's soul stolen. When we furiously peel back the blinding, glittery layers of the global K-pop machine and stare directly into the raw, unfiltered, and deeply scarred soul of BTS, we inevitably lock eyes with Min Yoongi, globally revered as Suga, and his fierce alter ego, August D, a musical genius whose incredibly painful, blood-stained journey from the freezing, poverty-stricken underground hip-hop scene of Daegu to the absolute pinnacle of global music dominance is nothing short of a harrowing, beautiful cinematic masterpiece. But what exactly happens when a man who has literally sacrificed his own physical body and mental sanity for his art finds his sacred musical sanctuary viciously invaded by blood-sucking, soulless industry parasites? To truly comprehend the sickening gravity of this exploitation, you must first desperately understand the agonizing, tear-soaked history of a young boy who was once forced to make the completely devastating daily choice between buying a cheap bowl of noodles to survive the night or paying for a bus ride home. A fiercely determined teenager who secretly worked grueling, bone-crushing delivery jobs just to afford basic MIDI equipment, ultimately leading to a horrific, life-altering traffic accident that completely shattered his shoulder, an excruciating secret injury he silently endured and aggressively hid from his agency for years because he was absolutely terrified it would instantly destroy his fragile, hard-fought dream of debuting. This is a man who brutally ripped his own heart open and bled his deepest, darkest traumas, crippling depression, severe social phobia, and agonizing suicidal thoughts onto the deeply devastating tracks of his solo mixtapes like The Last and Amygdala, bravely turning his own excruciating psychological torment into a universal, life-saving beacon of hope for millions of suffering youths around the world who desperately needed to know they were not fighting their terrifying inner demons alone. So imagine the pure, unadulterated volcanic rage that erupts within the global army when they discover that highly deceptive, opportunistic scammers and morally bankrupt music industry executives are actively, shamelessly weaponizing his deeply respected, highly coveted Prod Suga trademark, a golden seal of absolute musical excellence that he built through thousands of sleepless, agonizing nights locked inside his dimly lit genius lab studio, furiously producing global hits while the rest of the world slept peacefully. It is absolutely nauseating to witness these unauthorized shadow entities illegally manipulating his massive intellectual property, aggressively running fake, highly sophisticated beat leasing scams, heavily promoting completely bogus, unauthorized collaboration opportunities, and even launching fraudulent, highly volatile cryptocurrency and NFT music projects that falsely claim to have his direct personal backing, deliberately and maliciously preying on the desperate dreams of naive, struggling rookie musicians and loyal fans who would willingly empty their life savings for even a minuscule chance to work with or support their ultimate idol. How utterly despicable is it that these faceless, greedy corporate vultures, sitting comfortably in their lavish, air-conditioned penthouses, have the absolute audacity to digitally forge and violently exploit the sacred musical identity of an artist who literally poured his own blood, sweat, and agonizing tears into every single piano key he ever touched, effectively turning his profound, deeply personal artistry into a cheap, heavily commercialized weapon of mass financial deception that completely bypasses all international copyright laws and basic human decency. This is not just a mere dry legal dispute over stolen royalty percentages or a simple case of online identity theft. It is a direct, violent, and deeply unforgiving assault on the very essence of Min Yoongi's soul, a massive, terrifying violation that ruthlessly disrespects the pure, unyielding integrity of a producer who has always fiercely protected the authenticity of his craft above all else, fiercely rejecting the superficial, heavily manufactured norms of the idol industry to proudly champion raw, unapologetic self-expression.
When incredibly detailed, horrifying reports began to surface about highly coordinated, malicious groups actively trying to illegally trademark his underground rap names, or shady digital distributors illegally uploading his incredibly private, unreleased pre-debut tracks to obscure streaming platforms just to secretly siphon off the ad revenue and stream royalties, the fierce, highly mobilized BTS fandom immediately went on an absolute scorched earth warpath, meticulously tracking down IP addresses, exposing the massive, complex webs of corporate shell companies, and furiously demanding immediate, severe legal retaliation from big hit music, proving once again that the absolute fastest way to invoke the terrifying, unstoppable wrath of millions is to dare mess with the creative sanctity of their beloved genius producer. But even with this massive, impenetrable wall of fan protection, the deeply haunting, entirely suffocating question still violently lingers in the heavy air. How does Yoongi continuously find the immense, superhuman strength to keep trusting the deeply flawed, ruthlessly capitalistic music industry, knowing full well that every single time he releases a deeply personal, soul-bearing masterpiece, there is an entire army of unseen, opportunistic leeches desperately trying to violently rip it out of his hands, completely strip it of its emotional context, and aggressively repackage it for their own sick, twisted financial gain? Doesn't it just make your blood boil to the absolute maximum degree when you deeply realize that the very same vulnerable, incredibly introverted man who once locked himself in a tiny, suffocating bathroom to desperately hide from the overwhelming, terrifying pressures of the outside world, who relies on his music as his one and only true, safe coping mechanism, is now continuously forcefully subjected to this massive, unprecedented level of predatory corporate exploitation, completely destroying the safe, sacred boundaries he so desperately needs to peacefully create his life-saving art? The harsh, incredibly brutal reality of this ongoing, nightmarish situation forces every single one of us to take a long, hard, deeply uncomfortable look in the mirror and intensely question the toxic, ravenous nature of global music consumption, fiercely demanding to know exactly when the heavily regulated, multi-billion-dollar entertainment industry will finally step up and aggressively enact foolproof, ironclad legal protections that permanently shield brilliant, vulnerable creators like Suga from these relentless, bloodthirsty predators. Because if we completely fail to protect the sacred, deeply emotional sanctuaries of the artists who literally keep us alive with their music, what absolute devastatingly dark future is left for the true, authentic soul of the music industry? We are constantly forced to helplessly watch as the magnificent, awe-inspiring power of Min Yoongi's musical genius, the exact same genius that flawlessly birthed universally acclaimed, record-breaking collaborations with legendary global artists like Coldplay, Halsey, and Juice WRLD, is continuously aggressively targeted by these deeply malicious, highly sophisticated fraud rings, who absolutely refuse to understand that true art is not just a meaningless, easily tradable commodity, but a living, breathing extension of the artist's very own heartbeat. Just think about the sheer, mind-numbing hypocrisy of these scammers who dare to use the name of a man who famously despises superficial greed and constantly raps about the suffocating, soul-crushing dangers of capitalism and obsessive wealth hoarding, ironically using his highly anti-establishment, fiercely independent brand to execute the absolute most ruthless, hyper-capitalistic scams imaginable, effectively turning his deeply profound, socially conscious lyrics into a cruel, twisted joke at the expense of his wildly devoted, trusting fans.
Number 4. J-Hope, the sunshine shadowed, positivity profiteered, a vicious trap revealed. When we dive into the vibrant, pulsating heart and soul of BTS, we are immediately met with the radiant, seemingly boundless energy of Jungkook, universally celebrated as J-Hope, the group's fiercely strict yet incredibly affectionate dance leader, who has consistently and selflessly served as the ultimate beacon of relentless optimism for both his members and the global army. But what sinister reality unfolds when this painstakingly cultivated aura of pure sunshine and unwavering positivity is mercilessly hijacked by deeply cynical, money-hungry opportunists who only see his golden hope moniker as an infinitely exploitable marketing gimmick? To truly grasp the devastating, agonizing weight of this betrayal, you must first completely immerse yourself in the grueling, sweat-drenched origins of a young, passionately ambitious street dancer from Gwangju, a boy known in the fierce underground battle scene as Smile Hoya, who literally pushed his human body to the absolute breaking point, enduring countless brutal injuries, agonizing muscle tears, and the terrifying, suffocating uncertainty of the brutal idol training system, all to eventually emerge as the flawless, charismatic superstar who delivered profound, critically acclaimed solo masterpieces like Hope World and the astonishingly dark, introspective Jack in the Box. This is an artist who consciously chose to shoulder the immense, emotionally taxing burden of always being the happy pill for everyone around him, bravely hiding his own profound exhaustions, quiet anxieties, and entirely human moments of crippling self-doubt behind an iconic, heart-shaped smile that has literally saved millions of desperate fans from their darkest, most paralyzing depressive episodes, constantly radiating a genuine, deeply healing warmth that is notoriously rare in the manufactured, heavily curated world of modern pop music. So try to imagine the sheer, unadulterated, blood-boiling outrage that instantly ripples across the entire globe when the incredibly protective army discovers that faceless, morally bankrupt corporate entities, unauthorized apparel manufacturers, and highly sophisticated digital scammers are actively and aggressively weaponizing his sacred, deeply personal brand of hope, illegally slapping his name, his distinctive artistic motifs, and even his exact copyrighted lyrical quotes onto absolute garbage-quality counterfeit merchandise, fraudulent, positive vibes wellness retreats, and completely bogus, highly deceptive charity campaigns that shamelessly prey on the innate goodness of his fiercely loyal fandom. How utterly, sickeningly despicable is it that these incredibly cunning, predatory syndicates intentionally study J-Hope's long, beautifully documented history of quiet, massive financial donations to children's hospitals, disaster relief organizations, and marginalized youth programs, donations he always makes with absolute humility and zero desire for public applause, and deliberately use that exact same philanthropic reputation as a sickening psychological weapon to violently manipulate well-meaning fans into pouring their hard-earned life savings into completely fake, unregistered fundraisers that falsely claim to be personally endorsed or directly overseen by Hoseok himself. This is not just your average run-of-the-mill celebrity copyright infringement where some greedy company steals a famous logo. It is a profound, deeply grotesque violation of fundamental human decency, a ruthless, cold-blooded monetization of genuine human empathy that completely spits in the face of everything J-Hope has literally bled to represent throughout his entire, spotless, decade-long career. When highly disturbing, incredibly detailed reports began surfacing about completely unauthorized entities aggressively launching fraudulent, high-priced dance workshops or sketchy, unverified mental health apps that heavily implied a direct, official partnership with the BTS main dancer, deliberately using his universally trusted face to lure in highly vulnerable, desperate individuals who were genuinely seeking the
the exact same healing and comfort that his incredible music naturally provides. The global fandom did not just sit back in stunned silence, they immediately erupted into a highly coordinated, terrifyingly efficient digital task force, meticulously exposing the massive, complex webs of corporate deceit, aggressively mass reporting the fraudulent accounts, and furiously demanding immediate, unrelenting legal action from big hit music, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that you absolutely do not dare to mess with the sacred, life-saving sunshine of BTS without facing an absolute, catastrophic avalanche of fierce, uncompromising retribution. But even amidst this beautiful, heartwarming display of massive fan protection, a deeply agonizing, incredibly suffocating question continues to violently echo in the darkest, most terrifying corners of the entertainment industry. How does Jung Hoseok peacefully close his eyes at night, fully knowing that out there in the sprawling, completely unregulated, shark-infested waters of the global internet, there are constantly dozens of unseen, calculating predators sitting in dark rooms, obsessively brainstorming new, deeply twisted ways to illegally exploit his genuine, beautiful desire to spread love and peace into a massive, highly profitable financial scam? Doesn't it absolutely make your stomach churn uncontrollably to realize that the exact same vibrant, incredibly generous man who bravely stepped entirely out of his comfort zone to perform a historic, barrier-breaking, massively acclaimed headline set at Lollapalooza, proving to the entire world that he is a fierce, versatile, and deeply serious musical force to be reckoned with, is simultaneously being treated by these disgusting corporate vultures as nothing more than a cheap, easily manipulatable cartoon character whose sole purpose is to secretly line their bulging, filthy pockets? The incredibly harsh, brutal reality of this ongoing, nightmarish exploitation serves as a massive, glaring red flag about the deeply toxic, hyper-capitalist nature of the idol industry, forcing every single one of us to aggressively question a system where an artist's purest, most honorable intentions, their profound love for their fans, their deep commitment to social causes, their desperate desire to bring a tiny sliver of light into a hopelessly dark world, are immediately transformed into massive, glowing targets for the absolute worst, most predatory elements of human greed. It makes you deeply wonder about the intense, invisible psychological toll this continuous, unrelenting exploitation takes on a man who has famously rapped about his own terrifying, suffocating fears of his massive shadow growing exponentially larger alongside his blinding, unprecedented global fame. When every single time you generously smile, every single time you kindly offer a word of encouragement, or every single time you quietly donate to a noble cause, there is a very real, terrifying possibility that a soulless scammer will instantly hijack that beautiful moment to deceive and steal from the very people you love the most. How do you even begin to maintain your own sanity, authenticity, and genuine love for humanity? This infuriating, completely unacceptable situation goes so far beyond a mere scandal. It is a desperate, roaring plea for a massive systemic overhaul in how international intellectual property and celebrity likeness laws are fiercely enforced, a completely non-negotiable demand that the multi-billion-dollar music industry finally takes concrete, ironclad steps to aggressively protect the pure, incredibly fragile hearts of artists like J-Hope from these relentless, blood-sucking parasites.
Number 3. Jimin, the angel betrayed. Kindness weaponized. $1 million deception. When you close your eyes and deeply picture the breathtaking, ethereal magic of BTS, it is absolutely impossible not to be instantly captivated by the enchanting presence of Park Jimin, a mesmerizing, classically trained contemporary dancer whose angelic vocals and fiercely compassionate heart have rightfully earned him the absolute, unconditional adoration of tens of millions around the globe. To truly understand the devastating, agonizing emotional magnitude of the massive exploitation that has surrounded him, you first deeply need to comprehend the pure, unadulterated essence of the man himself. This is an artist who has notoriously and consistently been the unbreakable emotional anchor for his fellow members, the one who stays up until the crack of dawn to comfort a crying bandmate, a fiercely loyal friend who routinely makes massive, completely anonymous donations to struggling educational institutions, underfunded orphanages, and pediatric health organizations without ever seeking a single fleeting shred of media validation or public applause. But what exactly happens when a global superstar's absolute most beautiful, defining trait, his boundless, almost naive level of unconditional empathy, is ruthlessly hijacked and aggressively weaponized against him by deeply cynical, morally bankrupt individuals who view his incredibly trusting nature as nothing more than a shiny, easily exploitable gold mine? Prepare to have your fragile heart shattered into a million jagged, irreparable pieces, because the agonizing reality of Jimin's recent financial and emotional betrayal is a deeply chilling, absolutely horrifying testament to the incredibly dark, predatory underbelly of the Korean entertainment industry. In a shocking, completely unprecedented mega-scandal that recently sent massive, earth-shattering shockwaves through the entire global K-pop community, it was officially revealed and subsequently confirmed by Big Hit Music that Jimin had tragically become the unsuspecting victim of a massive, heavily calculated financial scam, orchestrated by none other than a widely known, seemingly trustworthy industry colleague, comedian Lee Jin-ho. Under the deeply deceptive, highly manipulative guise of sudden, desperate financial emergencies and supposedly urgent tax issues, this opportunistic predator shamelessly preyed on Jimin's famously soft heart, successfully begging the BTS star to lend him a staggering, jaw-dropping 100 million Korean won. Jimin, being the incredibly pure, deeply generous soul that he is, did not hesitate for even a single second to blindly help a trusted peer in dire distress. He simply asked for a standard, basic promissory note and quietly handed over the massive sum of cash, completely and utterly unaware that his hard-earned money was being rapidly and secretly funneled directly into the dark, destructive abyss of an illegal, entirely uncontrollable online gambling addiction. How absolutely physically sickening is it to realize that while Jimin was bravely pouring his own blood, sweat, and agonizing tears into meticulously producing highly vulnerable, soul-bearing solo masterpieces like Face and Set Me Free Part 2, violently fighting his own intense inner demons and the immense, suffocating pressures of unprecedented global fame, the very people he generously tried to uplift and protect were secretly laughing right behind his back, sickeningly treating his monumental, record-breaking success as their own personal, unlimited ATM machine. And if that wasn't already enough to make your blood boil to the absolute maximum degree, it was further revealed in heartbreaking detail that even after Jimin eventually discovered the horrifying truth that he had been ruthlessly duped and that the disgraced comedian had absolutely no genuine intention of ever paying him back, his immediate response was not explosive, vengeful wrath or immediate, aggressive legal destruction. Instead, in an act
act of almost superhuman, completely heart-wrenching mercy, the Promise singer quietly extended the repayment deadline by an astonishing 10 years. Just pause, take a deep breath, and truly let that sink in for a moment. The absolute devastating tragedy of a man whose heart is so unbelievably vast and forgiving that he continues to offer a compassionate lifeline to the exact same parasite that is actively, aggressively bleeding him dry. But the relentless, highly coordinated exploitation of Park Jimin's pristine, globally respected reputation tragically does not stop at personal, face-to-face financial betrayals by so-called friends. It bleeds aggressively and violently into the sprawling, highly unregulated digital wilderness, where his globally recognized, perfectly sculpted face and highly coveted name are constantly being hijacked by sophisticated international fraud rings. Imagine the blinding, scorching, utterly relentless fury of the fiercely protective global army when they uncover highly deceptive, deeply malicious online campaigns where unauthorized, shady aesthetic clinics, entirely unregulated diet product manufacturers, and completely bogus cryptocurrency schemes illegally plastered Jimin's copyrighted images all over their fraudulent advertisements, explicitly and falsely implying that his naturally flawless, God-given visuals or immense wealth were somehow the direct result of their sketchy, highly dangerous products. These faceless, soulless corporate vultures deliberately and maliciously prey on the desperate insecurities of highly vulnerable teenagers and deeply devoted fans, ruthlessly monetizing Jimin's immense global influence to forcibly peddle fraudulent, potentially life-threatening health supplements or high-priced, completely fake fan-meet VIP packages that completely bypass all basic ethical boundaries and international intellectual property laws. It is a profound, deeply grotesque violation of fundamental human decency, a cold-blooded, highly calculated monetization of an artist's very physical and emotional identity that forces every single one of us to aggressively question the deeply toxic, hyper-capitalist machine of modern celebrity worship. How does Jimin continually manage to magically summon the immense, superhuman strength to flash his breathtaking, eye-crinkling smile for the relentlessly flashing paparazzi cameras, knowing full well that every single time he extends a warm hand in genuine friendship or shows a tiny sliver of emotional vulnerability, there is a very real, absolutely terrifying possibility that someone is sitting in the dark shadows actively plotting to brutally exploit his pure kindness for their own sick, twisted financial gain? Doesn't it absolutely tear your soul apart to deeply realize that the exact same beautiful, highly sensitive man who famously once starved himself to the incredibly dangerous point of passing out during the grueling blood, sweat, and tears era, driven by a crippling, heartbreaking desire to be absolutely perfect for his beloved fans, is now continuously, forcibly subjected to this massive, unprecedented level of predatory corporate and personal exploitation? The visceral, deeply passionate anger continuously radiating from the global fan base is not just about blindly defending a wealthy, successful pop star. It is a desperate, roaring, unified demand for basic, uncompromising human decency, a fierce, unapologetic defense of Jimin's fundamental human right to simply exist as a kind, compassionate human being without constantly being hunted, manipulated, and heavily commodified by blood-sucking leeches who worship nothing but money. When the horrifying, undeniable details of these massive betrayals fully emerged into the public eye, the army did not just sit back and trend a few angry hashtags. They immediately mobilized with terrifying military-grade precision, aggressively mass-reporting the fraudulent accounts, publicly exposing the incredibly complex, deep webs of corporate deceit, and fiercely demanding that the multi-billion-dollar entertainment industry finally step up to enact ironclad, completely foolproof legal protections for the pure, incredibly fragile hearts of artists like Jimin.
Number 2. V. The visual prints targeted, privacy invaded, a ruthless defamation campaign. When we furiously turn our intense, highly investigative lens toward the incredibly enigmatic, deeply soulful, and universally breathtaking Kim Tae-young, globally celebrated by millions simply as V, we are immediately and violently confronted with a deeply disturbing reality where unprecedented historic fame rapidly transforms into a terrifying, completely suffocating prison built by obsessive stalkers, greedy cyber-bullies, and faceless digital mercenaries. To truly comprehend the agonizing, heart-shattering severity of his massive exploitation, you must first fully grasp the incredibly deep, deeply profound essence of the man who literally coined the globally recognized, highly impactful phrase, "I purple you," a brilliantly sensitive, multi-talented artist with a deeply comforting, rich baritone voice who has bravely channeled his innermost personal struggles, profound romanticism, and intense feelings of isolation into massive, critically acclaimed solo masterpieces like Singularity, Stigma, and Winter Bear. This is a fiercely loyal, intensely private, and undeniably unique individual who has constantly prioritized genuine, raw human connection and pure, unadulterated artistic expression over the superficial, heavily manufactured trappings of the traditional K-pop idol industry, often spontaneously jumping onto the fan community platform Weverse in the absolute dead of night to casually play video games with his beloved army, share his deepest, most intimate jazz music recommendations, or bravely speak his unfiltered truth about his own fragile mental state. So what exactly happens when this beautiful, painstakingly cultivated vulnerability and unmatched global influence are ruthlessly hijacked by soulless digital parasites, highly aggressive paparazzi, and incredibly malicious cyber wreckers who view his massive, untouchable global stature not as something to be deeply respected and fiercely protected, but as a shiny, endlessly profitable target to relentlessly attack and heavily monetize for their own sick, twisted amusement and massive financial gain? Imagine the pure, blinding, earth-shattering, and utterly relentless fury of the fiercely protective global fanbase when they uncovered the truly terrifying, incredibly detailed depths of the massive defamation campaigns spearheaded by notorious, heavily monetized YouTube channels like the infamous Sojong, an absolute digital bottom feeder who spent years aggressively manufacturing sickeningly false, highly damaging, and deeply invasive rumors about Tae-young's private life, his personal romantic relationships, and his deeply respected professional conduct within the entertainment industry. How utterly despicable and thoroughly nauseating is it to fully realize that while V was tirelessly working around the clock, violently pushing his physical body to the absolute brink of human exhaustion during the historic, record-breaking Love Yourself global stadium tour, and meticulously preparing his soulful, wildly successful solo album Layover, these cowardly, faceless cyberbullies were sitting comfortably behind their glowing computer screens in dark, isolated rooms, heavily profiting off massive, completely fabricated, and deeply malicious scandals explicitly designed to violently tear down his unblemished, hard-earned reputation. And the horrifying, deeply sickening exploitation absolutely does not stop at mere digital defamation, fake YouTube ad revenue, or deeply deceitful clickbait articles. It bleeds aggressively and violently into his most sacred, incredibly private physical sanctuaries, culminating in terrifying, deeply traumatizing, and highly illegal stalking incidents that left the entire world absolutely speechless with horror and genuine palpable fear for his immediate physical safety and long-term mental well-being. Just pause, close your eyes, and try to put yourself in his extremely vulnerable, highly scrutinized shoes for one single agonizing second. Imagine finally arriving back at your heavily secured, deeply private luxury apartment after an incredibly long, physically draining day of non-stop global photo shoots and grueling dance rehearsals,
only to discover that a highly delusional, completely unauthorized, and dangerously obsessed individual has actively bypassed strict building security measures, illegally tailgating your private, heavily tinted vehicle directly into the underground parking garage just to forcefully hand you a marriage certificate, sickeningly treating a living, breathing, profoundly sensitive human being like a completely commodified, easily accessible object rather than a real person entirely entitled to fundamental privacy, basic security, and unconditional human decency. The sheer, terrifying, far-reaching magnitude of these massive privacy breaches and relentless online attacks is more than enough to send icy, paralyzing shivers down the spine of absolutely anyone who truly cares about the fragile human soul behind the massive superstar moniker. If a completely obsessed stalker or a greedy, highly motivated cyber-bully can so easily and shamelessly bypass expensive, supposedly ironclad physical and digital security measures just to unlawfully access or heavily defame Kim Tae-young for their own selfish, deeply twisted gratification, what other malicious, unseen, deeply sinister forces are constantly lurking in the dark, unregulated shadows of the global internet, patiently waiting for the absolute perfect opportunity to brutally exploit, secretly photograph, or illegally sell his incredibly private, highly sensitive information to the highest bidding trashy tabloid? It is an absolute, deeply suffocating, and thoroughly inescapable nightmare that forces V to constantly look over his shoulder, completely destroying the safe, sacred boundaries he so desperately needs to peacefully exist, creatively breathe, and continue producing his life-saving, universally beloved art, leaving us all to intensely wonder how he continues to miracle muster the incredible superhuman strength to flash his beautiful, iconic, boxy smile for the flashing paparazzi cameras and enthusiastically wave to the massive screaming crowds. Doesn't it absolutely make your stomach churn uncontrollably and your blood boil to the maximum degree to deeply realize that the exact same vibrant, incredibly generous man who bravely opened up about his own agonizing struggles with severe idle burnout and the terrifying pressures of being constantly watched by the entire planet is now continuously, forcefully subjected to this massive, unprecedented level of predatory exploitation? The visceral, deeply passionate anger continuously radiating from the fiercely protective global fan base is far more than just about blindly defending a wealthy pop star from a few mean online comments. It is a desperate, roaring, unified demand for basic, uncompromising human decency and a fierce, unyielding defense of Tae-young's fundamental human rights, because if the heavily regulated international entertainment industry completely fails to aggressively protect the sanctity, privacy, and physical safety of one of its absolute most prominent, globally respected figures from such blatant exploitation, it sets a highly dangerous, deeply terrifying precedent for every single other artist currently trying to safely navigate the treacherous waters of extreme global celebrity. We must absolutely never forget that directly behind the massive stadium-shaking roars, directly behind the billions of record-breaking streams, and directly behind the incredibly intimidating exterior of the ultimate global fashion icon, there is simply just a fiercely passionate, sensitive, and deeply loving man from the quiet town of Gochang who simply just wanted to make music that truly matters and authentically connect with the real people who genuinely love him.
Number 1. Jungkook, the golden maknae commoditized, youth stolen, a voice hijacked. When we finally arrive at the absolute pinnacle of this devastating countdown, we are forced to directly confront the deeply heartbreaking, incredibly infuriating reality of Jungkook, the universally beloved golden maknae of BTS, whose incredibly pure, unparalleled rise to global superstardom has tragically made him the ultimate, #1 target for the most ruthless, terrifying forms of exploitation ever witnessed in the modern entertainment industry. To truly, deeply comprehend the immense gravity of the horrific violations committed against him, you must first take a step back and profoundly reflect on the fact that this is a young boy from Busan who literally surrendered his entire childhood and fragile teenage years to the grueling, unforgiving spotlight, debuting at the incredibly tender age of 15 and growing up right in front of the flashing, relentless cameras of the entire world. He is an artist who poured his literal blood, sweat, and agonizing tears into perfecting his craft, evolving into a historic, record-breaking solo powerhouse who completely dominated the global Billboard charts and powerfully commanded the massive stage at the FIFA World Cup. Yet despite his god-tier status, his astronomical success, and his immense wealth, he has always consistently remained incredibly grounded, desperately craving genuine, raw human connection with his fans through his iconic, hours-long late-night Weverse live streams, where he would simply sing, cook, fall asleep, and bare his beautiful, unfiltered soul to millions. But what happens when that exact same pure, unguarded vulnerability and massive, unparalleled global influence are mercilessly hijacked, aggressively weaponized, and violently monetized by a deeply sinister network of faceless digital scammers, privacy-invading stalkers, and morally bankrupt corporate entities? Imagine the sheer, unadulterated, blood-boiling fury that instantly erupts across the fiercely protective global army when they discover that unauthorized, highly sophisticated tech companies and malicious digital pirates are actively stealing his exact copyrighted vocal likeness using advanced, highly unregulated artificial intelligence, creating thousands of completely unauthorized, heavily monetized AI covers and fraudulent audio clips that falsely mimic his golden voice just to secretly siphon millions of dollars in streaming revenue and ad money directly into their own filthy pockets, completely bypassing all international copyright laws and sickeningly stripping away the profound emotional human soul that makes his actual singing so incredibly special. It is an absolute grotesque violation of his fundamental artistic identity, effectively turning his God-given, painstakingly trained vocal cords into a cheap, easily replicable digital commodity for ruthless scammers who wouldn't know the first thing about genuine musical passion or the thousands of hours he spent crying in the vocal booth trying to achieve absolute perfection. And the terrifying, deeply invasive exploitation aggressively bleeds far beyond the digital realm, violently crashing directly into his most sacred, incredibly private physical sanctuaries, completely destroying any fleeting illusion of safety he might have left in this chaotic, hyper-capitalist world. Just think about the deeply horrifying, absolutely chilling reality where completely delusional, dangerously obsessed individuals, so-called sasangs who actively disguise their malicious criminal stalking as twisted devotion, somehow illegally obtained his highly confidential, unlisted home address and began relentlessly sending unwanted food deliveries directly to his private residence, forcing a deeply uncomfortable, visibly distressed Jungkook to publicly beg him on the internet to stop invading his home, a desperate, heart-wrenching plea for basic human decency and physical boundaries that absolutely no human being should ever have to make. How utterly physically sickening is it to fully realize that even when he completely stepped away from the blinding stage lights to enjoy a rare, quiet moment of personal downtime with his friends, his fundamental human right to privacy was viciously ripped away by greedy, opportunistic employees at a private karaoke room who illegally leaked highly confidential CCTV security footage of him just to spark massive, completely fabricated dating rumors and chaotic internet scandals, completely prioritizing a few moments of viral internet clout and cheap tabloid money over the basic legal rights and personal dignity of a living, breathing human being.
Big Hit Music was furiously forced to aggressively launch massive, uncompromising lawsuits against the karaoke business and the individuals involved to fiercely protect his honor, but the permanent, deeply agonizing psychological damage of knowing that you are constantly, relentlessly being watched, secretly recorded, and actively betrayed by the very everyday citizens around you is a suffocating, incredibly heavy burden that completely shatters a person's fundamental ability to ever truly trust anyone ever again. Furthermore, he was viciously targeted by massive, highly coordinated digital defamation campaigns, spearheaded by malicious, heavily monetized YouTubers who spent years aggressively manufacturing sickeningly false, deeply invasive rumors about his private life, forcing Jungkook and his agency to ruthlessly hunt them down and secure a massive, historic legal victory against these cybercriminals in court. But the terrifying reality remains that the internet is constantly swarming with these soulless bottom feeders, desperately trying to tear down his unblemished reputation for a quick, dirty buck. The relentless commodification doesn't stop there. Massive international fraud rings and unauthorized bootleggers constantly hijacked his perfectly sculpted face and highly coveted name to illegally peddle fake, low-quality merchandise, bogus fan meet tickets, and deceptive health products, shamelessly preying on naive fans and completely ignoring the intense legal and emotional ramifications of their deeply sinister actions. Doesn't it absolutely tear your fragile soul apart to deeply realize that the exact same beautiful, highly sensitive young man who famously tattooed the word "Army" across his knuckles out of pure, unconditional love for his fans is now continuously, forcefully subjected to this massive, unprecedented level of corporate and personal exploitation? The visceral, deeply passionate anger continuously radiating from the fiercely protective global fan base is far more than just about blindly defending a wealthy pop star. It is a desperate, roaring, unified demand for basic, uncompromising human decency, fiercely demanding that the massive multi-billion-dollar entertainment industry finally step up to unconditionally protect the incredibly rare, beautiful, and irreplaceable Golden Maknae who continues to generously, selflessly give his entire heart to a harsh, predatory world that constantly tries to brutally steal it.